discussion as people join in. Keep throwing where you're from in the chat. My name is Amelia. I'm an account executive at Staffbase, and we'll just kind of be moderating this whole thing. Mark and Sarah are really going to be running the show. There are IC pros, and I will let them give their own introductions. If Mark, you want to go first?
Oh, thanks very much. Hi, thank you, Amelia. So I'm Mark Wright. I'm the founder of Simply Communicate, which is the biggest community of IC, internal comms professionals here in Europe. And we run events, big events, mostly in London. And I'm very glad to say that Staffbase are our platinum partners for this year. So we'll be seeing a lot of Staffbase. But as well as running these events and running a community, we also do help organizations put in platforms. So we're very hands-on as well in the digital arena. That's me.
All right. Thanks, Mark. And Sarah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am the leader of internal channels and operations at GE Vernova. So really focused on making sure that we have the right channels for our employee communications and employee engagement campaigns.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. I have got some questions prepped for everyone today, but I will also be keeping my eye on the chat. So if anything comes up, toss it in the chat and I won't interrupt myself, but ask your question while we're still on the relevant topic instead of like going back at the very end and circling back to questions. So keep it interactive. Anything that comes to your mind, let me know. And if we don't get to it, I'm sorry. Hopefully we will, but we will try to answer everything we can. So we will kick it off in terms of the macro dynamics of internal comms today. What are some key external dynamics shaping the future of internal comms right now?
Do you want me to start, Mark? I think the biggest one that I see is AI and how we use it to our advantage in internal communications. I think there's a lot of fear around it in some areas, but I think there's a way to use it smartly to make our jobs a little bit easier and also, to help us do some tactical things so that we can really put focus on strategic initiatives and, raise ourselves in internal communications as strategic partners. So I think to some, it can feel a little scary, myself included, but I think if you get in there and play with it, I think it's really going to be a game changer for our function.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, Sarah. It is a game changer. I think we haven't even started to see the change that it's going to make, but it's going to be massive. I think for me, it is that word change is a thing that's really affecting the way IC professionals are working since the pandemic. There's been a huge amount of change, partly driven by that, partly driven by the economy, partly driven by technology. And so what does that mean for us in IC? It means that we are no longer just talking about change and giving those messages, but we actually have to be ambassadors of change. So that means that we have to develop those change management skills so that, in the old days, we just take the words of the executive suite and put them out there into the organization. But now we have to create alliances with IT, with HR, with operations, with sales, with marketing, to help the whole organization go through some massive changes that are happening. No organization has stayed the same in the past couple of years. So change management, for me, that's the big thing that IC is getting its head around and has a real important role to play.
For sure. All right. Doesn't look like there's anything in the chat. It is a couple of minutes delayed. So sorry if I get to your question like 2 minutes after the topic, but we will go on to the next one if there's no questions from the group. And that is, how do global trends and shifts in communication preferences impact internal comm strategies?
If I kick off and then hand over to you, Sarah, I think that we can't ignore the economy. Things are getting better in the States. We've just recently been acquired by Gallagher, which is obviously an American company. And so I'm much more aware now of the lens from Chicago, which is that America's coming out of recession. It's it's got good growth figures and so on. But in Europe, and particularly in the UK, there's still people don't want to spend money. Let's put it that way. The finance director, she's hoarding that money because sales aren't going that fantastically. The economy's not growing. And so to keep profits up, a lot of products are being stalled. And that means that if you're working in IC, you've got to do more for less. That project keeps on getting put off, and certainly the recruitment of more staff for your team is being put off. So it's made us much more resilient and perhaps a bit more resourceful to squeeze an extra bit of value out of everything we do, and particularly in the area of where you're putting in a digital workplace intranet, because this is not a cheap thing to do. It's a long-term thing to do. So we've seen the lead times on those projects take longer. They used to happen within 9 months to a year. Now they're taking about 18 months for proper digital workplace channels to be okayed and then finally launched. So yeah, we're suffering a little bit from the economy, but I'm sure that will change as it is in North America.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I think that's obviously a great one. I think too, like really focusing on investments for employees. I think there's definitely a shift where I work on, when it comes to internal communications and engaging with employees and making sure that we have what we need to reach all employees. I think too, from my perspective, I work for an energy company, and so politics is an external thing that affects the company as a whole, but also, impacts the way that we communicate with employees and stakeholders. And I think that's something that's going to happen forever. But I think it's really, really heightened right now, especially in the US. So that's just another external factor, global resource or global trend that we have to deal with. But I think it's one that, we're quick to change when we need to and address what we need to. So, we try to take things on as they come.
Yeah, I think that green energy subject is such a fascinating one. We've seen it happening first in the States with the Inflation Reduction Act. Now Europe is getting its act together and subsidizing and encouraging. It's not just about subsidizing sustainable energy. It's about unleashing innovation so that we can build new industries and new tools, new techniques, new products, which are going to reduce our carbon emissions. It's probably the most important issue that faces us today. And I think that is, it's a subject which is manna to us in internal comms, because it aligns basic principles of how you should do business better with economic principles of how you make money out of these new green technologies. So I'm looking forward to more green technologies becoming top of the agenda for IC.
Thanks, guys. In terms of technologies, we've got the green technology, but David, thank you so much for throwing a question in the chat. And I think this transitions nicely into some other questions we do have planned in terms of new tech coming out in the IC space. But from your point of view, what are your views on Copilot and things like ChatGPT, using those as possible AI tools?
Can I start off with Copilot? So Microsoft, with the announcement of the Viva Suite, which is well over a year ago, 18 months ago now, a lot was promised. Viva Connections, we'd have a sort of better out-of-the-box intranet from Microsoft and so on and so forth. And Copilot is huge. But the promise of it and the delivery of it is delayed. So a lot of the time when we're talking to clients or to our members and they're saying, well, should we get a bespoke digital workplace platform as Staffbase delivers, or should we just use AI in Copilot and the Viva Suite? And we're Viva partners, and we're engaged partners, and it's just not ready yet. We have not been able to successfully roll out a fully Microsoft digital workplace for a large organization, because there's so many different products in there. It's so complex. Microsoft is like a lot of different companies. They don't always talk to each other. So I have no doubt that Copilot, AI, ChatGPT, I'll let Sarah talk more about those products, but I've no doubt that these will have an enormous impact, and Microsoft are betting the right horses. But from a comms point of view, it's very, very difficult to roll them out today without having big technical knowledge, and still there are gaps between the different products. So for the moment, I prefer to use out-of-the-box solutions, because you can launch them, they work immediately, you can see how they work. Whereas if you're going purely the SharePoint route, or connections route or whatever, it's a lot harder to make that work from a comms perspective. That's my view. It's going to come. It's very, very important, but it's a little bit overhyped in terms of delivery today.
Yeah, and on my side, Mark, full disclosure, I haven't used Copilot. I have not researched it at all. I have used ChatGPT, just playing around with it. My caveat with ChatGPT, just coming from a very large company with, obviously we have sensitive information. So when I use AI tools, ChatGPT, that kind of stuff, obviously, I am very conscious to not put in anything that could compromise our company. So I would advise that to everyone as well, to be very sensitive about, there's a difference between putting in ChatGPT, like, write an article about cybersecurity tips for employees versus, reorganize this article that I wrote about, our policies or something. So I would just caveat with that. But I do think AI tools like ChatGPT can help us. I think, if you're in a pinch to write something that's simple, it can help get you started so that, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time and you can pull yourself up and be more strategic. I think too, there have to be guidelines around using it for internal communicators. I think a big one is, not to lose trust with your employees. So, coming out and saying, we'll never use AI to create a video of our CEO. Like, if you're seeing the CEO, you are seeing the CEO. It's not, made artificially in any way. So I think that's still to come. I think a lot of companies are working on that, and how they will and won't use it. But I think just always keeping in the back of your mind, like, don't do something that will make you lose the trust of your internal stakeholders and your employees. I think that's a huge, huge part of it. But I say use it to your advantage, like, work smarter, not harder. It's definitely something that can help us. And I don't think as internal communicators, we should be afraid of anything like this either.
Yeah, that's true, Sarah. It's all about governance, isn't it? Getting the right and communicating that governance out there. The concern I have around generative AI, because we use it a lot, it's fantastic. You can create logos with it. You can create images with it. I find it so liberating. But it stops us collaborating. So in the old days, you brief a designer. And when you're briefing a designer, particularly if it's an in-house designer or an agency that knows you really well, they'll have ideas. They say, oh, yeah, well, we did that last year. That didn't work. But actually, this is working really well. And if you just put in to generative AI your commands for creating a logo or whatever, you're kind of working on your own. And so there's a danger. Say, for instance, you're working within HR. I can see HR creating materials using a generative AI, which you'll never get involved with until you see them there, out there on the intranet. So we've got to be very careful about losing collaboration just because we have these robotic tools that make us individually more powerful.
100%. Thank you for engaging, David. following up, definitely did touch on the two big text generative tools like Copilot and ChatGPT. But a follow-up was what AI tools you're using to create logos and images, if there's any that come to your mind.
I haven't personally. I go to my creative services team to create logos. So I don't have any experience with it yet. Not saying that I never will use the tools. I just don't know. I don't know, Mark, if you've used any.
Yeah, we quite like Picasso. Picasso is good. That's a very useful one. But again, the point you made earlier, Sarah, which is that as soon as you put stuff in there, which actually is from inside the intranet, which is company IP, you're giving it away. And so that's very dangerous. So we're looking forward to a time when these tools are available behind a firewall. And so you can be absolutely certain that you're not giving away the blueprints of your new product or anything like that to the wider world. But they are incredibly powerful, and they do produce great work. And it's an iterative process. These large language models models are getting more and more powerful. And so what we're seeing now is tip of the iceberg of what these things can do.
Yeah, I'll just following off that, typically, what's the word? Tip of the iceberg is what you said. Like some of them are great. Some of them, if you see those things on LinkedIn, like silly photos, like you ask it to create one thing and then it's got like gibberish typed in it because it can't quite get letters, or like people's hands look all mangled, things like that. So it's hit or miss, exactly like Mark said, but those are some fun examples. Something that it is good for, I think this kind of goes off what Sarah mentioned in terms of the more personal information you feed it, the better it can get, but you don't want to give it too much information. So when it comes to whether it's internal or external, is the personalization of your messaging, which, you know, ChatGPT, if you've got the free one, only goes up to info on the internet to 2022 is what I've heard. And you can feed it all you want, but there's that firewall Mark mentioned. So in terms of using tools like this, like how can hyper personalization, whether it's with an AI tool or on your own, enhance employee engagement and satisfaction across your internal landscape?
Well, if I can kick off on this one, this is really, really important, because if you think about how you interact externally with brands, so say, you know, Nike, for instance, you don't go to the Nike website. You know, Nike come to you, and they come to you where you're looking at stuff on Instagram, and it's all about personalization. You know, those algorithms know more about you than your partner does, and you might know yourself. So what happens is when Nike wants to get a message to me, it will find me in the places where I am on social media, and at the time that I'm most likely to be receptive to those messages, and might, you know, get my credit card out. So this is now starting to happen internally. So we're starting to get hyper-personalization within organizations. And this makes a big, big difference, because in the old days, a lot of us were spending our time doing channel management, weren't we? We were kind of working out who goes to which channel should we put this on. We'll put it on the news channel, and we might put it in the email, and we might do a notification about it. That is going to change, because AI will allow us internally to know, for Amelia, this is when she is more likely to be receptive to a particular message, and how many times we need to get that message to her before she'll take an action on it. So exactly what has happened in external marketing is happening today in internal comms. And you really need to have a point of view that puts the user, or the reader, at the center of your publishing strategy. So you're saying for these people, particularly frontline workers, and I think this is another thing that has changed a lot in recent years, is getting to frontline workers, because we've kind of got to desktop workers, haven't we? You know, they've got their intranets, they read their emails and so on. So the real incremental or big step difference we can make today is getting to our frontline workers, particularly factory floor workers who maybe cannot use their smartphones on the factory floor. So how on earth do we get to them, and how do we attract them? And I think personalization is absolutely key. They are not going to be interested in the latest financial reports or what I might be interested in, but they are going to be very, very interested in news from the previous shift if there's been a problem with machinery, or they're very interested in what's in, what might be in the canteen, or they might be very interested about what's happening about their product, and so on and so forth. So hyper-personalization is absolutely changing us from a content-centric approach to communication to a user-centric approach to communication. And just as it's changed newspapers, television, radio, it's going to change our industry, and is changing our industry already.
Yeah, and to add to what Mark said, in my experience, obviously mapping out what message goes to what channel has kind of been the way we've always done it. But we use Staffbase at GE for our intranet and app. So that has allowed us to do a lot of personalization to, the frontline workers, the desk workers, our workers who are out in the field, who may not be at a plant or even behind a desk at home. So making sure that, their homepage looks different based on the news that they would want to see. Their links are different. They want to get to their paycheck, or they want to get to the site to report a safety concern or something like that, which is different than, someone who might be based remotely or, at a desk in an office. So I think those tools that are now becoming available are becoming super helpful for us to reach employees that centrally we haven't always been able to get at, just because of barriers. And even still, there definitely are some who can't have their phones. They can't even have their phones in the cafeteria at some points, but figuring out different ways to reach them. And I think too, in terms of hyper personalization, I think at the end of the day, people are still going to go to their manager to get the information that they need. So making sure that managers have what they need to be able to disseminate that information is still super prominent. And I don't think that will change a whole lot. I think people still want to have that trust in their manager and will go to them first.
Yeah, that's very true, Sarah. And I think there's an opportunity for us to start creating channels just for team leaders and for people managers. So, if you've got a big announcement coming out, it goes out on the intranet, but we should have a channel specifically for those who have to cascade it. So we give them the information, but then we give them a nice bite-sized version of it so they can use that in their meetings or just in their conversations. We give them some key bullet points which they can bring out and topics of conversation, but most importantly, allow them to feed concerns back up through comms to senior management around a particular initiative. And for too long, I think we saw middle managers as the enemy of communications. They called them the permafrost. Nothing was getting through. They're actually the most important population for us to personalize to and to support, as you've just said. So I'd like to see more of that happening. And the very way that people are managed now is very, very different. We've seen hierarchies crumble, particularly with work from home and more virtual teams and so on. So those people who do have a role in talking to frontline staff are so important.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys touched on different topics like different channels and leadership communications, because that transitions really well into some of our other topics we'll touch on today. But I don't want to get too far ahead of Kelly's question, because thank you, Kelly, super topical to what we're talking about right now. So before we move on, in terms of the governance of AI, do you think internal comms departments should take a lead role in governing the stage of AI tools to ensure that they align with organizations' values and goals?
Yeah, we have to step up and lean into this, really. Now, why is that? Well, if you think back about when social tools were first introduced into companies, whether it was Yammer or whatever systems they were using, or WhatsApp, with these informal shadow IT things, IT did not give any advice about how they should be used. And so people just used them as they would. So I think that the reason why we have a role to not just communicate governance, but to help it work and happen is that we are people. Our job is to convince people of stuff. Normally It's to convince them to read an article or to follow a campaign or whatever. But we have those soft skills to convince people or to nudge people towards doing things the way in which the organization benefits. And so, yeah, don't let legal counsel, the last people we should leave is legal counsel to do the governance on this sort of stuff, because they'll just produce reams and reams and reams of legalese that nobody will ever read, let alone understand. So yeah, this is a job for comms, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a partnership too, because obviously we can't write the pages of legal speak, but I think it's a partnership with, digital technology, cybersecurity, legal, comms. I think we all play a role in making sure that we keep not only our employees safe with it, but keep our company safe.
Yeah, and working with the unions and the work councils here in Europe, that's very, very important. Involve them early, give them space on the internet. So give your unions, give your work councils microsites within because that's a great traffic builder, apart from anything else. But involve them early, say, look, this is what we're doing about AI. Let's get your views on it as well. And let's get your endorsement, or let's get some kind of compromise around it. So it's not just working with the big functions, it's also working with unions and data security.
For sure. Great question, Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. And then in terms of the way you are communicating with those people and giving them those channels to get involved early, what are some strategies that organizations employ to foster more transparent and authentic communications from leadership?
I think from my experience, we're going through a lot of change. If people have read anything about GE, we're splitting into 3 independently publicly traded companies. And so there's a lot of change happening. So we do a lot with our CEO communications. Those are very important as we hit milestones, so employees know what's happening. If something is happening externally, we're announcing something externally. We're also sharing it internally to make sure our employees know about it and feel good about it, feel like they want to share these milestones on social media alongside our leadership. So there's a lot more CEO communications and leadership communications. But I think too, having our intranet site as well as a single source of information, we have historically been pretty siloed in our businesses. So now with our intranet, employees can see, no matter what business they're in, they can see what's happening in another business, so they can get that full view of who we are as a full company. And I think that transparency is important too, for employees to feel that like one team. It's something that, our CEO talks about a lot. We are one team. We're not siloed businesses anymore. And so I think those are things that, can help employees feel better, especially when there's a lot of change. And as Mark said earlier, there's always going to be change. We can't run from it. So I think just using clear communications from the CEO and having a place where employees can go find any information that they need or want is important for them to feel like, they know what's happening and that there's transparency from the top.
Yeah. I mean, transparency from the top, you'd like to think that it's getting better, wouldn't you? You'd like to think over the years, senior executives have kind of taken on board that they've got to be good communicators and they've got to be transparent. That just hasn't happened. It's always bothered me, why it is, because I've been in this business for far too long, why it is that senior executives, haven't become better communicators per se. And the reason is personality. This has nothing to do with progress or anything. It's just the kind of people we are. And so you can have a great communicator as a CEO and can do a fantastic job, but they leave and someone else comes in who's very, very different and has a different focus. And you just have to, as a communicator, kind of live with that. You have to work with the style of your leader, because if you try and push them into being, the warm, outgoing person that their predecessor was, they're just going to recoil. So it's a tricky one. The best thing to do is to look across your executive suite and see who are the ones who are natural communicators, and really work with them, because they will then thrive. They'll then come across very well. They'll be popular. They'll get more engagement through their content. And then pretty soon, the other members of the C-suite will say, she's doing quite a good job there in finance and talking about stuff which is not just finance. Maybe I should be doing that as well. But don't be dispirited if you've got a slightly, I don't want to say introverted, but generally speaking, those CEOs who are very good at building businesses and getting successes tend to be not great communicators. They tend to be the quiet types. And those that make a lot of noise don't necessarily deliver the financial results. So it's something that we have to live with as communicators, this whole transparency thing.
For sure, people all communicate differently. And as someone who was kind of in the job hunt a few years ago, everyone now is listing their values. One of them is transparency. Some mean it a little more than others, and they interpret it differently. But I have seen that now as a theme in terms of company values. But what it actually means for people can be different, like you just said, Mark. So it's important, but how do you think that transparent communication, in whatever way you're doing it, can work to build trust and employee morale in the workplace?
I think employees feeling like they're part of the company is a huge piece. So, like we've mentioned before, reaching frontline workers has been hard. They don't attend all employee meetings, but now that they have an app, they can read what the CEO is saying now. They can read, great business news about wins in the business. They can see, the products that they touch having an impact, not only on the company, but on the world and, the energy landscape. And I think that is a win for us, for employees to be able to see more across the business, to truly feel like what they do has an impact. And I think that for me personally, when I can see that I do something really great and get feedback from employees that were like, that was super helpful to us, or, that makes me feel good. And it makes me feel like what I do has, meaning to the company and to the business and to the people. And I think that's truly what employees want to see. Obviously, they want salary increases and bonuses and benefits and all that. That's a big piece of employee morale. I'm not saying that one email that we send from internal communications is going to make people the happiest they've ever been. But I think there is a way, we do play a pivotal role in employee engagement and making sure that employees feel like they're a part of the company and they're appreciated.
Yeah. And you've got to be consistent, and you've got to do as you say. There was a classic example of the CEO of a furniture company who just ripped into her people about the fact they weren't achieving their targets. And she ripped into them unmercifully, although she actually got a really big bonus herself that year. And of course, she felt that she was just telling people off within the organization. Anything that goes on the internet, anything that's streamed, can go externally. And she looked incredibly foolish, and it damaged the brand with what she did. So it's about discipline, being consistent, and really only saying stuff that you can back up with hard evidence and actions.
Kanika's got a really good question around this. Like, you can have all the greatest comms in the world, but if no one's seeing them, what's the point? So how do you get those frontline workers who are usually a bit out of the know because of the state of their job to actually download an app like this onto their personal devices?
Yeah, we're still working through that challenge and trying to figure out what works best. We do have I personally think some of the employee engagement campaigns we do throughout the year, one of them for us is Earth Week, just naturally as an energy company. But that usually gets great engagement from frontline employees because they're out in their community volunteering. And so then encouraging them to download the app, share their photos, see what, their colleagues around the world are doing. We're all participating in volunteer events throughout the week, throughout the world. We have, as we spin off into our own company, that's another big one of, information that they will need or want about any changes, encouraging them to download the app on their personal phone. And I know there's a barrier of, is the company going to track me? I don't want this on my personal phone. We're not tracking anything that they do on their phone. We really just want them to be able to get that information. But like I mentioned too, I still think, the managers of frontline workers are still going to be a pivotal channel for us. And I think too, using them to help us build that trust with those workers to download the app. If the managers see the value and be like, hey, you can go read this, or you can go share this, or, go claim, some swag here. I think that'll help. But if anyone, I'm all ears. If anyone has mastered the art of getting frontline employees to download an app on their personal phone, we're trying. We're not 100% there yet, but we'll get there.
It is fiendishly complicated. We're doing it at the moment with a medical devices company, and you have to work very closely with IT because obviously you've got to have the Apple standard, you've got to have the Android standard. There's all sorts of worries from IT about people. Even if you have a self-contained app, it might have links to your SharePoint sites, and they don't want an unauthorized phone, a phone that's not registered, as it were, accessing those things. So we've got to work very closely with your IT teams to work out what is possible within your security frameworks. So don't overpromise. But then when you do that, the way that we found to be very, very successful is to give people access via their smartphones to those apps that they use in their work or could use in their work. And the most popular ones are shift changes. So, if I want to change my shift, I'm on the factory floor, I have to go to a kiosk, or I have to phone, or I have to, ask my boss. It can take a long time to get your shift changed. Shift swapping software exists, and it's very easy to implement. And so, you can say, look, I've got to go to the doctor's next Thursday. Anybody can take my shift instead. You get an offer within minutes. Though that kind of functionality will drive people to their smartphones, even if they're doing it in their restrooms, even if they're doing it on the bus going to work, even if they're at home, they will use it. And once they're on there, then you pop in your comms. So our job is to make the important interesting. So you then put a little banner up above that shift change thing about something that's happening, and a particular bit of comms from senior execs. And that's the trick. But you have to start with what they need to get their job done. And then once they start to use it, because it is going to be in their time, it's very difficult for them to do it on the shop floor. And in retail, it's the same. Once you get them there, then you can attract them with your other stuff. But it's not easy. It's a hard task to do.
100%. And as more and more of Gen Z graduates, I think we'll see that kind of shift, especially like Mark said, like whether you're on the bus and you're just like, oh, shoot, let me swap my shift real quick. Odds you're going to want to take out your laptop and change it. Like I work in front of a desk all day. I still think I access my intranet more often from the phone because it's never when I'm sitting there. It's when I'm on the go and I'm like, oh, shoot, let me check this one thing real quick. Am I going to run home and open up my laptop? No. And that is a trend we've seen, over time, and it's probably just going to get more popular. A little plug for how I've seen the app used, or any sort of app. But obviously Sarah's got Staffbase, and we've talked a lot about an app and frontline employees, but are there any other examples of channels that you guys have used and proven effective in engaging any sort of diverse group. Like we can talk more about those frontline employees, or we can talk about desk employees, really anything that comes to mind aside from the app. Or if you want to talk about the app, go for it. Like, I don't want to make it a stop. There's Reddit, so talk all you want.
We have to talk about social. We have to talk about communities, because communities are a big driver of traffic and interest and engagement, because we spend so much time working in teams. So when you're working in teams, you're working with the people that work with you on a particular project or within your business function unit and so on and so forth. Communities allow you to talk to people elsewhere in the organization, but where you have a common interest. So whether that's photography, whether it's marathons, or whether it's women in R&D, whether it's the green issues that we've been talking about, whether it's diversity. So communities are fantastic vehicles for getting engagement, because suddenly I can reach people on the other side of the world, but who work for my company and who've got an interest that's shared with me. But because they are communities and because they are run not by the comms department, the comms department would go mad if they're running all the communities. They're run by community managers. They can get out of hand. You can have too many of them. They can grow like Topsy. You can have duplication and so on and so forth. So encourage them. But again, it's the governance word. Put in the governance so that if there are two communities that are doing almost exactly the same thing, you can encourage them maybe to join together.
Yeah, I like that. We have, our employee resource groups that I think we use a lot in internal comms too, just to make sure that what we're saying will land, and helping them as well communicate their events, get more members, that kind of stuff. I will say though, I think for us having an intranet as a channel, one single intranet as a channel has been huge for our internal comms team. I think it's taught us a lot about the content that we share. I know my teammates are probably tired of me harping on this, but I always say, like, we need to think about the content first and then figure out where that content fits into a channel. Because historically it's always just been, let's send an email. We need to send an email. You need to send this email right now. And it's like, but does it need to be an email? Does it need to be a standalone thing? And so I think, when organizations think about what channels they need, maybe it's not an app and intranet, but I encourage everyone to just think content first. Like, what is it that you need to share? Does it make sense to send it to managers to disseminate? Does it make sense to post it on an intranet and send a push notification? Is it a poster, in the cafeteria or in the bathroom of a plant? So that's my little PSA that I've been harping on for the past 2 years within my company of, what is the content? What is the message? And then we'll figure out the best way to get that out to employees to get the most engagement.
That's so true, Sarah. And we have to become a bit more creative again. We've spent all this time working with technology and working on the systems of communications. But as these systems become more automated, and we've seen that obviously with external social media and external apps and so on, they're so slick. It's then about, share of eyeballs, because there's so much going on. Our biggest challenge now is just to get the attention of our colleagues, because they have got so many different places they can go to. And no technology will do that for you. It will enable it, but it will not guarantee success. And what guarantees success is, as I said earlier, it's making the important interesting. So it's really snappy writing. If you're writing for the mobile, much shorter. Don't just publish what you've done on the desktop. Do it, rewrite it, or use ChatGPT to rewrite it, to summarize it. That is a good use of ChatGPT. To summarize it down and make it appropriate for people who are skim reading. But the most important thing is headlines and images. We really have to up our game on those. You look at any social media and you can see, the stuff that gets watched is either incredibly attractive, or it's got that clickbaity title, headline type thing. or it's funny. And humor is an enormous part of communication. So perhaps as the technology takes over, the AI takes over, we'll become more creative again and go up the food chain. And we should be focusing on making accessible, interesting, clickable content.
Yeah. And Sarah, I know the world is your oyster when you create content, because I know GE has the app, the Intranet. A lot of your employees have emails, some of them don't. You can make posters, but you create the content and then you think, okay, what channel do I want to put it on? But let's rewind like 2 years to 2022 before you guys implemented those new channels. What other factors were you looking at? Because like Mark said, like companies don't want to spend money. IC departments don't have the money. If I'm being honest, from a sales perspective, I hear that all the time. Like, what are factors that organizations should be considering, that you guys considered or everyone should be considering before they implement something like this? Like when they're in the process of selecting which channels they should actually put their energy into for employees.
Yeah, I think whether or not it's user-friendly is a big one. I think who you can reach. So for us, obviously the Intranet with the app option was huge because we were like, oh my gosh, we can reach frontline employees directly. And, we can put it on personal phones. We worked with our technology team to make sure that was available. I think too, just making sure it makes sense for us as an internal comms team. I have seen some other, we used to use SharePoint. I'll just say that. I'm sure a lot of people use SharePoint. It's like user-friendly enough to get stuff done. I was never really truly able to make pages as pretty as I want. I don't know how to code. I'm not a coder. I'm not, I am a creative brain. I am not an engineer brain. Don't ask me to do math. I don't like to do it. But I think, finding something that's easy to make it look pretty, no matter where you sit in the organization. It's not just internal comms that's owning communications. There are teams out there who have their own page on our app that they're managing, and they're able to make it pretty. So I think ease of use is a big thing. Making sure that it's user friendly on the other side for employees. We can reach everyone that we want to reach, because with email we can't reach everyone. There's frontline employees who either don't have email or they have it but they can't access it on their personal phone, so they just never access it. So I think there are a lot of different factors there, but I think audience and type of content is a big thing.
For me, the big opportunity we have now to try and prise those wallets open and get some money for comms is analytics and data. So, I have to admit, SharePoint analytics is pretty poor. What Microsoft provide you out of the box is limited. But Google Analytics can be applied to most websites. And if you can prove to your senior executives that only a third of all their staff are reading the senior comms, are reading the news about what's happening in the organization, 2/3 are not reading it. And then you can benchmark that against other companies in the automotive sector or whatever it might be. Everybody else comes to board meetings armed with data, whether you're sales, whether you're finance, whether you're production, whether you're quality, whether you're HR. And we don't, we come in with a fuzzy feeling. So really use that data, get what you can on, if you've got a steam-driven old intranet, run on SharePoint, you can still find out who's reading what, or rather what articles are being read and what areas are being looked at. And then you can benchmark that. And there are lots of benchmarking, well, not lots, but there are a few benchmarking tools that are available to us, whereby you can compare, is this world-class or is this really not very good at all? And that's what makes change happen. So analytics and data, that's probably a skill we need to develop more.
That's huge. And if there's nothing in the chat, speed round question I want to ask you too. We've talked a lot about the current trends, how AI is shaping the right now 2024, but are there any emerging trends or things you're predicting that are going to shape the future of internal comms, maybe 5 or 10 years in the future?
Are you okay if I go first, Mark?
Yes, please.
I don't know if this is really an emerging trend, but I know it's something that we talk a lot about as an internal comms team. I think shifting the perception of internal comms and communications in general to be a truly strategic enabling function for a business. I think we're not order takers, especially with, all the global trends happening and, external factors. I think we sit in a very unique position where we have direct access to leadership, obviously, to help them communicate, but we also have very good line of sight to employees and what they want and what they need. And so we get to be that go-between and be that strategic partner to leadership to truly shape what employees need in communications and to be that strategic partner for all of our audiences to make sure that they know that they're valued. Obviously, the CEO wouldn't have a job without frontline employees building the product. And I think making sure that we use our unique position for good, I think that'll strengthen our industry going forward and our function. And, other companies that might not have dedicated internal communications will go, oh, shoot, maybe we need someone. Maybe we need that strategic voice. So hopefully it'll help grow our profession. And again, I don't know if that's an emerging trend, but for me, it's like, we have to get there eventually. I don't think we're going to go backwards. I think it's only upwards for us from here.
Yes, internal comms is not order takers. If you take one thing away from this webinar, that's the quote of the day. Thank you, Sarah. Mark, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think that if I was really going to take a long-term punt on this, so let's go through the 10 years rather than the 5 years. So what AI will do is it will bring in more automation, and we're seeing this already. So 10 years from now, it's probably not an exaggeration to say that there will not be any delivery drivers anymore. It will be done by automated vehicles. There'll be fewer people on the shop floor. I mean, some factories are run, with a bare scattering of people. What does this mean? This means that people who are in employment, working for large organizations, are moving up the value chain. They'll be more educated. They'll be doing more value-added work. So we have to be ready for that. And that means really treating our colleagues with more respect. It's really bringing well-being into the comms arena as well. So making sure that what we're communicating also does not harm anybody. It doesn't stress people out and so on, and is aligned to well-being. We've got to be more diverse. I mean, I think the way that we communicate currently with neurodiverse people within corporate comms is pretty poor. If you're not we're all extroverts, tend to be extroverts anyway in comms, and we think everybody should be like us. But there are a lot of people who do not like a lot of noise and who do not like to be disturbed too often. So I think respect, is probably, when I came into this business, we were coming out of the craft schools, so we were ex-journalists, ex-TV people and so on. And we were very elitist, and we said, the masses, pour it out to them. That's what's changed, is that we are now dealing with audiences that are very sophisticated, very well educated, and who can leave and transfer their skills somewhere else. So respect, I think, will be the big change over the next 10 years.
Oh, okay. I'm glad I ended on that question then, because both of your answers, I love that. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Please follow Staffbase on LinkedIn. We do a bunch of webinars like this. I promise they're not Staffbase commercials. They're for your sake. We are not order takers. Just join us. Here's some best practices, upcoming trends, everything like this webinar. And we also have voices coming up. It is a full 2-day event geared just towards internal comms. It is virtual. You can join from anywhere. It is the Coachella of internal comms via the internet. We've got speakers from all over, and they're on our website. So, it's a 1-day event. I misspoke. I'm so sorry. But yes, thank you so much. Kelly added all 3 of our LinkedIns in the chat. So feel free to connect, reach out to any of us if you have any questions, and hopefully join some more webinars coming up. Thanks, everybody.